My son stared straight through me like I was a problem to be solved. He didn't raise his voice, but every word landed hard. "Why are you even here?" "You're just a burden now." The room shrank around me. A fork clinked against a plate. Someone coughed and looked down. "I'm Harlan Brooks, 69 years old, retired auto mechanic, widower. I've got a daughter, Maya, who sees more than she says, and a son, Derek, whose ambition could light a city. We were in Derek's new house, the one with the wide windows and the echo in the hall because he hasn't had time to hang pictures. He invited his co-workers for a celebratory dinner. He told me I should come too. Family, he'd said, like it still meant the same thing to both of us. I felt that familiar ache in my knee, the one I pretend doesn't slow me down. My chest tightened, not from the years or the work, but from the shame of being dressed down by a child I once carried on my shoulders through fireworks and Little League losses. I could hear my late wife, Ellen, in the back of my mind. "Don't answer from hurt," she used to say. "Answer from strength." So I didn't argue. I didn't list the nights I worked under cold shop lights long after the bay doors were locked. I didn't talk about the winters where I stretched soup and pride into something that looked like dinner. I didn't remind him that when Ellen got sick, I learned to braid Maya's hair and pay the mortgage in the same week. Instead, I reached into my jacket and felt the crisp edge of an envelope. I'd written it 2 nights earlier at the kitchen table in my small apartment, scrawling in big block letters when my hands cramped. I sealed it. I told myself I might never use it, but Derek had made up my mind for me. I slid the letter across the table toward him. "You want to know why I'm here?" I said, steady and quiet. "Read this." Maya's chair scraped softly. She touched my shoulder. "Dad." "I'm all right," I told her, and I was, or at least I needed to be. Derek looked at the envelope like it might bite him. Around him, his colleagues shifted. A woman in a neat blazer pretended to straighten a napkin. A man cleared his throat and took a long drink. They'd all laughed easily with him a moment ago. Now, the room had gone still. He tore the flap open with a sharp rip. His eyes fell to the page. The smirk he wears when he's winning faded a degree. Not gone, not yet, but retreating. He read the first line, then the second. His hand stilled. He swallowed. The color washed out of his face, the way an engine's noise drops when you finally cut the power. I didn't say a thing. There are moments in a man's life when words get in the way of truth. I'd said my share over the years. Corrections, prayers, apologies. This time, I let the ink do the work. I took a slow breath and let the room's silence stretch. I wanted the audience. His friends, my daughter, and every person who has ever mistaken kindness for weakness. To feel the gravity that comes when a father stops defending and starts revealing. If you've ever been told you're a burden by someone you built a life for, you know the feeling. It's a sharp, bright pain that reminds you you're still alive. I held that pain close, not to make Derek pay, but to make sure the truth landed with the weight it deserved. He kept reading. The lines I wrote at 2 a.m., the numbers, the years, the things I never said out loud because pride is a stubborn animal. His jaw clenched, then loosened. Someone at the table whispered, "Oh." Maya's hand tightened on my shoulder. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on my son, the boy who once fell asleep on my chest while I watched the late game. The man who now looked like the floor had shifted an inch beneath his shoes. I could have cried. I didn't. I could have walked out. I stayed. I could have explained every choice I made, every secret I kept, every envelope I slid under office doors when Derek was too young to know what debt means. But explanations sound like excuses when pride is loud. I chose proof. Derek lifted his gaze to me for a beat, and in that 1 second I saw the first crack in the wall he'd built between us. Then he dropped his eyes back to the page and kept going. This is where it all turns, I thought. This is where the story stops being about my hurt and starts being about his reckoning. What was in the letter? The truth. The kind that knocks the wind out of a room. The kind that makes a son understand why his father still stands in the doorway, even when he's no longer wanted. The kind that makes a face go pale. I grew up in a town where engines told the time. You could hear the shift change from the plant, the rumble from the highway, the cough of an old Chevy turning over on a cold morning. My father taught me that if you listen long enough, machines will tell you what they need. People, too. I spent 46 years leaning over hoods, learning to tell the difference between a rattle that could wait and a knock that meant pull over right now. I married Ellen in a church with a leaky roof and the best choir you ever heard. We didn't have much, but what we had, we held tight. She laughed with her whole face. When the kids came, Derek first, loud and demanding, then Maya, quiet and watchful, life shifted into a rhythm I could trust. Work, family, church on Sundays, spaghetti on Thursdays, games in the park when the weather cooperated. Then life did what it does. Ellen's chest x-ray lit up like a bad dashboard. The doctors said words you don't want to learn the meaning of. We fought, and she fought harder. We lost. It's a clean sentence for a messy year. After the funeral, I made lunches at 5 a.m., learned to braid hair badly, and talked to a photograph with a smile I couldn't let go of. Derek was ambitious even then. He liked winning, and I liked the way his face glowed when he did. He said, "Dad, I'll take care of you one day." I believed him, not because I needed him to, but because I wanted to believe that the love we poured into our kids comes back the way a good engine returns power when you ask it to. When Derek got into a good college, I worked later. I stopped buying new boots every winter and learned to line the old ones. I fixed cars for cash after hours, cursing rust and the way salt eats everything it touches. I wrote checks I wasn't sure I could cover and somehow covered them. I told Derek not to worry about money. "Focus on your studies," I said, the way fathers say it when they don't want their kids to carry weight too soon. Maya watched all of it and didn't complain. She brought home library books and sat at the kitchen table doing homework while I changed the oil in a neighbor's minivan. She filled our small house with a gentleness that kept grief from taking all the air. Years later, my knee started barking at me. At first, I pushed through it, then it pushed back. I cut my hours. The shop owner gave me a look I recognized from my own face in the mirror. It said, "Time has a way of winning." Derek moved to the city and took a job that paid him to talk fast and shake hands. He wore suits that fit, smiled with all his teeth, and learned to schedule his life. I visited when he said he had time. I learned how to be small in his big world. When I fell off a step stool reaching for a box of Ellen's things and cracked a rib, he drove down and said, "Dad, you shouldn't be alone. Come stay with me a while." It sounded like love. Maybe part of it was. His new house was a monument to his hours. Glass and steel, curated furniture, an island in the kitchen you could land a plane on. He bought it with confidence and numbers on a screen, and he toured me around like a realtor. "This is the office. That's the gym." I nodded and told him I was proud. At first, it worked. I kept to my corner, made coffee, fixed a cabinet door that squeaked. I learned where he kept the good knives and the bad towels. I stayed out of the way when he took calls. I tried to be something soft in his hard days, but pride has a way of crowding a room. The little sighs started, the eye rolls, the way he corrected me in front of people, then said he didn't mean anything by it. the way he talked to me like I was another appointment to manage. I told myself he was stressed. I told myself I could take it. I told myself lots of things men tell themselves when silence feels safer than truth. Maya noticed. She'd call at night and ask if I was sleeping. Fine, I'd say. You know me. She did. That's why she didn't believe me. When Derek announced a dinner to celebrate a promotion, he said, "You're coming, right?" I said, "Yes." I ironed my best shirt and polished the only shoes I keep for occasions. I set the table quietly and listened to his colleagues laugh about flights and bonuses. I tried to blend in, but a man who taught himself to be invisible still takes up space. The scene was set, the cast was in place, and the line that would split my life into before and after waited in my son's throat, ready to be spoken. The evening opened smooth. People arrived with the perfume of success: leather seats, dry wine, expensive cologne. I greeted them the way a man does when the house isn't his, and the people aren't his either. I said, "Welcome," and meant it. I handed over coats and memorized names I'd forget by breakfast. Derek moved through the room like a quarterback calling plays. He poured drinks without looking. He touched shoulders. He laughed at the right volume. He introduced me quickly. "This is my dad, Harlan." A few hands reached out. "Sir," they said. Some meant it. I busied myself in the kitchen, where the small work lives, warming rolls, watching the timer, slicing limes. Maya arrived late from a shift at the clinic, scrub top under a sweater, hair in a knot. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "You good?" I nodded. She pressed her mouth thin, but didn't push. At the table, conversation pinballed from earnings to travel to a rumor about a merger. I listened, not lost, just quiet. A young analyst asked me about my work. I told him I'd been a mechanic. He said his dad was one too. "Hard work," he added, "honest." Before I could answer, Derek cut in. "Dad's got 1,000,000 shop stories. Careful, or he'll have you rebuilding a carburetor before dessert." He meant it as a joke. The table chuckled. I smiled to keep the room steady. Later, someone asked about the house. Derek launched into the story of the bidding war and the deal he negotiated like a prize fight. He caught my eye and said, "Old man here finally gets a real kitchen." The way he said, "old man" wasn't love. It was performance. I kept my face still. Maya asked about a campaign at work. Derek gave a tight summary, then glanced toward me, already bracing. I didn't ask a question. I nodded and reached for my water. But small slights add up like loose bolts. The more he talked, the more he ignored the space I took up. When I stood to clear a plate, he corrected me. "Leave it, Dad." "We'll get it." When I reached for a bottle, he whispered, "That's the good one." When I mixed up a name, he laughed too loudly and said, "He's still catching up." We were halfway through dessert when the moment came. A colleague cracked a joke about parents moving in and never leaving. The table laughed. Derek laughed, too, longer than the joke earned. He looked at me the way men look at something that used to be useful. His voice was even. "Why are you even here? You're just a burden now." The plates went silent. Forks paused. A woman across from me folded her napkin and stared at it like it might explain what to do next. Maya's breath hitched, sharp and fast. "Derek," she said, warning and plea in one word. He lifted a shoulder. "What?" "I'm being honest." Honesty, I thought, has an honest cost. I could have stood up and let the chair legs scrape a line across his perfect floors. I could have emptied 30 years of tired into that room, listed invoices and weekends, and the way grief leaves fingerprints on light switches. I could have told them that the down payment on his future had my name scratched under it in places he never bothered to look. Instead, I caught his eye and held it. "You want an answer?" I asked. He smirked. "Please." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope. I didn't make a speech. I didn't fold. I slid it across the wood and said, "Read." Maya's hand found my back. "Dad," she whispered. I could hear the tremble she was trying to hide. I kept my focus on Derek. He turned the envelope over like he was checking for a trick. Then he tore it open, paper ripping with a sound that made everyone flinch. He unfolded the pages. He read. I watched the change start small, a furrow, a breath, a blink that lingered. His mouth tightened. His posture shifted from the lean of a man on stage to the tilt of a man remembering his first fall. Someone whispered, "Is he okay?" The room held still. I had written that letter because I knew words said in anger are forgettable. Paper isn't. Ink stains. Numbers don't flinch. I let him move through the first paragraphs, the ones about Ellen, the ones about choosing love over sleep, heat over pride. Then the ledger parts. Then the parts fathers don't share because sons deserve a shot at walking forward without looking back every 5 steps. He reached a line I knew would land. His eyes flicked up, then back down. Color left his face like a tide going out. I didn't move. The man who'd been told he was a burden stayed planted. The son who said it kept reading because sometimes the only way out is through. 2 nights before that dinner, I sat at my kitchen table in the apartment I'd kept after moving in with Derek. The clock that used to hang in our old house ticked loudly, the way it does when you're awake at hours that belong to the birds and the night shift. I laid a legal pad in front of me and wrote Harlan Brooks at the top out of habit, like I was filling out a form for a part I needed. I looked at Ellen's photograph on the fridge. Her smile steadied me. "I'm not calling him out," I said to the empty room. "I'm calling him back." I began with stories because stories carry people where numbers can't. I wrote about teaching Derek to ride a bike in the church lot. He crashed and bled and got back up. I wrote about Maya's science fair volcano that erupted all over our linoleum, how we laughed until we cried. Then I shifted to the ledger, the way a man does when he needs someone to see what the soft words cover. I wrote about the spring of Derek's sophomore year when tuition came due and we came up short. I sold my red 86 F-150, the truck Ellen loved, the one with the bench seat, worn smooth by our life. I used that money and what was left of Ellen's small insurance payout to keep Derek enrolled. I didn't tell him, because I didn't want generosity to become gravity on his shoulders. I wrote about the car accident when he was 17. He was sober. The other driver was angry and loud. I paid the damages in cash across 3 months and kept court out of it. I didn't tell him because shame teaches the wrong lesson. Accountability taught the right one, and he learned it, or I thought he did. I wrote about co-signing the business loan he needed when his first job fell apart. He promised the numbers would work. When they didn't, the bank called me. I refinanced my house, swallowed the interest like a dry pill, and saved his credit before it cost him the next job. I didn't tell him because I wanted him to move forward unburdened. Funny word, forward. I wrote about the down payment on his house. He saved a lot, he worked hard, but markets are what they are, and the last piece came out of my retirement. I told myself I'd rebuild it. Then my knee surgery estimate arrived, and I folded the plan into a drawer. I ended with a truth a man can't say without shaking. I wrote that love is not a ledger, but sometimes you need to show the receipts. When I finished, I read it aloud to the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear Ellen again. "No anger," she said in my memory. "Just truth." I folded the pages, slid them into an envelope, and wrote Derek on the front in the block letters he learned from me. At the dinner, when he said the thing that broke the room, the choice was already made. I gave him the letter because I couldn't carry both his pride and my silence any longer. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. I was trying to stop the slow leak in us that would eventually leave nothing to steer with. When he opened it, I let Maya see the signal in my face. This isn't a fight, it's a turning. She nodded, jaw set, eyes wet, a nurse's steadiness growing inside a daughter's bones. "Read it out loud," she said to Derek, voice low but steady. "No," he said, almost a gasp. "Then finish it," she answered. "All of it." He kept reading, paragraph by paragraph, mile by mile. He reached the part about the truck. He looked up. "You sold the Ford?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. I nodded once. "You needed it." He swallowed and kept going. The room wasn't hostile anymore. It was something else. Witness. People shifted from spectators to bystanders at a roadside scene, unsure whether to walk away or stand guard. I watched my son become a person in front of me again, the way a photo developing in a tray takes shape out of blankness. Arrogance washed off first, then defensiveness, then the last thin layer of performative calm. What remained was a boy who had loved me once without embarrassment, and a man who had forgotten how to show it. The turning point wasn't the envelope crossing the table. It was Derek choosing to turn the page instead of throwing it aside. He didn't argue, he didn't posture, he read. Sometimes the bravest thing a man does is face what someone else carried for him. By the time he reached the last lines, his breathing had changed, slower, heavier. I felt mine match it. Two engines finally idling together after miles out of sync. I didn't plan a speech for when he finished. I didn't rehearse grace or consequence. I had only a father's hope that the truth, once seen, would start doing what truth does when it lands in a heart that still remembers how to feel. Derek's hands shook. The pages fluttered slightly, and he pressed them to the table to tame the tremor. His colleagues sat very still, as if movement might break something fragile. Maya watched him with a nurse's triage, deciding where the bleeding was worst and whether to let it happen. He read the opening lines aloud without meaning to. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I chose paper because my voice would come out wrong." The room absorbed my words as if I were speaking through him. He swallowed and kept going, murmuring under his breath, then louder, catching on certain lines. He read the story of the red Ford truck, the title signed over at the notary, while I smiled like I was selling a toy and not a history. He reached the sentence about the insurance payout and paused. "You didn't tell me," he said. "You were studying for finals," I answered. He kept reading. "When you were 17, I handled the accident so your record would stay clean. Not to erase responsibility, but to give you a chance to face it without losing the next 5 years." He winced, memory and gratitude colliding in his eyes. He moved to the business loan. "I signed my name under yours. When the calls came, they didn't reach you because I took them." He blinked hard, his throat worked. He lifted the page to cover his face for a breath, then lowered it. He read the line about the down payment. "The last piece of your house came from my retirement. I figured I'd work a few more years to rebuild it. Then the knee told me otherwise. I chose your start over my finish and hoped you'd never have to choose like that." He stopped. The room heard the sentence even though he didn't say it out loud. "You are standing on ground I paid for twice." He reached the final section, the one I wrote at the end when my hands were tired and my heart was stubborn. He read it aloud now, voice unsteady. "Son, you called me a burden. I carried you when your legs were small and your pride was big. I carried you when grief made you angry at everyone. I carried what I could so you could carry what mattered. I don't expect repayment, I don't keep a ledger, but I need you to know the weight you're standing on has a name. It's mine. Call it what it is. Not a burden, a foundation. He finished. The last word hung in, the air like a bell tone. No one spoke. The air changed. Derek's shoulders slumped, the armor sliding off piece by piece. His colleagues looked anywhere but at him, as if privacy could be borrowed for a moment. Someone said quietly, "I'm sorry, Mr. Brooks." I nodded, because grief doesn't need an audience, it just needs room. Maya broke the stillness. "Derek?" He turned to her, eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy who'd fallen and needed permission to cry. "I didn't know," he said, small and honest. "You didn't want to know," she answered, not unkind. "There's a difference." He turned to me. Pride tried to make a last stand in his jawline, then gave up. He stood, pushed his chair back, and faced me square. "Dad," the word came out like a plea, and an apology threaded together. "I'm sorry." I was cruel. I forgot I stood too, because some words deserved to be met standing. "Forgetting happens," I said. "Staying there can't." He nodded, a short, broken movement. "I don't know how to fix all of it." "You start with the first bolt," I said. "Then the next." He wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand. A laugh escaped him, raw and embarrassed. "You and your car metaphors. They got us this far." I tried to smile. It felt earned. He looked around at his colleagues. "I think we're done here," he said softly. No one argued. Chairs scraped. Coats were retrieved. Some patted my shoulder. A few hugged Maya. Then the door closed behind the last one, and the house exhaled. It was just the three of us. The father who'd put it in writing, the daughter who'd held the line, the son who'd read to the end. It didn't fix everything, but something true had been said, and truth changes the room it enters. Derek folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope like it was something that could break. He handed it to me with both hands. "I want to earn this back," he said. "You can't," I answered. His face fell, and I took his hand. "Because it isn't debt. It's history. What you can do is build something on it worth the cost." He nodded, slow and sure. The lesson landed. The pale in his face had color again, soft and human. The climax wasn't a shout or a slam. It was a son seeing the floor he stands on and calling it by its right name. The next morning, Derek knocked on my door like a kid afraid of waking a bear. "Coffee?" he asked. "Always," I said. He poured it wrong and too strong, and I drank it anyway. We sat at the kitchen island he loved to brag about, and he didn't brag. He asked questions. Real ones. "Did it hurt to sell the truck?" "How bad is your knee?" "Why didn't you tell me?" I answered the same way I wrote. No anger, just truth. Maya came by on her break. She took my vitals because she can't help it, and then sat with us, legs tucked under her, eyes soft. "We're going to the orthopedist," she announced. "Both of you, if I have to drag you." Derek winced. "Both?" "You, for that shoulder you keep rubbing when you think no one is watching," she said. He smiled, caught. In the weeks that followed, change didn't arrive with trumpets. It showed up in chores done without asking, in the way Derek listened instead of waiting for his turn to talk, in him saying, "I'm heading to the store, what do you need?" Like we'd done this 100 times. He joined me on my slow walks after dinner. He turned his phone face down. He told me about a deal that went sideways and didn't pretend it hadn't hurt. He asked if I wanted to move back to my apartment or stay. I told him staying only works if I'm not treated like a misplaced lamp. He said, "I hear you." Then he meant it. Respect is not a speech. It's 1,000 small doors held open. One Saturday, he drove us to a lot outside town. We walked between rows of trucks like pilgrims. He stopped at a red Ford, not the same year, not the same seatwear, but close enough to tug. "I know it's not the one," he said, "but I'd like to buy it for you if you'll let me." I ran my palm along the hood and thought about years and choices and the way life circles back. "You can ride shotgun," I said. His grin cracked open like summer. He didn't argue when I insisted we split the cost. He wanted to repay. I wanted him to partner. We met in the middle, where families survive. Some nights I still hear the sentence he threw at me. It doesn't cut like it did. It sits like a scar, proof I healed. I keep the letter in my top drawer. I don't reread it often. I don't need to. The point of telling the truth is to set it down and let it work. At church, a man my age squeezed my shoulder and said he'd heard about the dinner. News travels even when you don't send it. "You did right," he said. I shrugged because pride can sneak in from the good door, too. I learned something I wish I'd learned earlier. Love without boundaries turns a man into a ghost in his own house. Setting the boundary didn't shrink my love for Derek. It made room for his respect to grow. One evening, we were eating on the back steps. Paper plates, good sky. Derek cleared his throat. "Dad, do you remember when I was 10, and I lost the championship because I missed that last swing?" "You didn't lose it," I said. "Your team did. You told me we go home the same either way. I stand by it." He nodded. "I want you to know I'm not going to miss this. I'm going to be the kind of son Mom would be proud of, the kind you deserve." I stared at the yard and blinked until the blur gave way. "Then start tomorrow," I said, "and the day after. That's how men do it." He reached over and squeezed my forearm, not hard, just steady. We sat like that, two quiet shapes in a world that can be loud and careless, deciding to care anyway. If you're listening to this because you've been called a burden by someone you built a life for, hear me. Your worth isn't up for debate. You are not a weight to be carried. You are the ground they stand on. If you need to write it down, write it. If you need to hand it across a table, do it. Not to shame them, to wake them. Derek and I won't win every day. There will be old habits and new frustrations. But the axe is shifted. He knows the name of the floor now. He's choosing to stand on it with gratitude. And me? I'm choosing to keep walking, knee and all, toward the kind of days Ellen prayed we'd see. Simple, honest, full of small kindnesses that add up to something you can point to and call a family. You are not a burden, you are a foundation. Build like it. And that's my story. A story of pain, sacrifice, truth, and finally, healing. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever given everything for someone only to feel forgotten, I want you to know this. Your love matters. Your sacrifices matter. You are not a burden. You are the foundation. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who might need a reminder of the love that built their life. And most importantly, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment down below. Tell me about a time when someone finally recognized your sacrifices, or about a lesson you've learned in your own family. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw, real, and from the heart, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new one. Thank you for being here with me today, for listening, and for allowing my story to become part of yours. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of the ones who carried you.